No, I think this is good. I think so. Good morning. And thank you for that lovely introduction. It's such an honor and a privilege to be with you all today. The opening of the conference was probably the most moving opening I've ever seen in Trans Health, because you included the spiritual component, and that is something that I haven't seen done, and it set the stage for me. I believe that this is very much a spiritual field. It's about connectivity, inclusivity, love, and it's about working for something larger than self. Working together for something larger than self. Now, I was introduced as a person who's been in the field for 50 years. I saw my first trans person in 1972, and I'm a therapist in private practice in San Francisco, but over the years I've become involved with the world of professionals and the community with the goal of increasing access to health care, compassionate and competent health care for all trans people. And my goal from a very early age, becoming involved in this field, was to be global, to be truly global, and to listen to Dr. Sanjay, two Dr. Sanjays actually, about the dreams of the field here in India. It's the dream that so many of us have had. And I really applaud you. I applaud knowing that you are so much further along than most countries already. You have governmental support, which we still don't have. I'm from the United States, and we have it. We don't have it formally. We certainly have it from our president and many, many people in terms of authority, but we don't have it as formally as you already have. So I just want to say you are starting in a place where your dreams and your vision can come true. Because one of the things I want to say about this field, of all fields, is interdisciplinary. It's an interdisciplinary field, and that includes mental health, primary care, surgery, voice, education. I mean, you think of any medical and mental health field, and there are fields that work in trans health. And then, last but not least, very important, involves the community, because the community are people who know what is needed to provide competent and compassionate health care. So it's very important to remember that as you work in developing your standards of care, that the community voice is heard. So, I want to say that before Dr. Sanjay was thinking of who to invite from WPATH, he included me because I have been in the field for probably longer than anyone who's still practicing. And then my colleague, Dr. Michael Marshall, was also coming with his partner, and my partner is here. And he, unfortunately, I don't know if you heard, he died just a few weeks ago. We had been planning our trip together and had an entire program, and he died suddenly. But why Dr. Sanjay selected Dr. Marshall, and I'm dedicating this talk to him, was that he is an openly was an openly trans man who focused on two things: intersectionality of all kinds. He was so inclusive and wanted all people, races, any kind of intersectional experience to work together in this field. But he also focused on wellness, because so much when you're studying and working in trans health, we were talking about trauma, stigma, lack of acceptance. But Dr. Marshall also wanted to celebrate wellness. What does it mean in terms of wellness in trans health? And I think that's also something very important. Yesterday we had a press conference, and a trans man whose name is Man, I'm not saying it right, I don't think, but he focused on gender euphoria. So I want to remind you too, because I really have worked so long in the field, and I know trans people as a group are so resilient and so persistent and so patient, and yet are understandably impatient as well, which is also our job to, and you're doing in here, and you were laughing, Sanjay, but as part of our work here is to work more quickly, if we can, so that trans people can have the same rights as anyone else. And that's very important, human rights. All right, so that's what I wanted to say about Dr. Marshall. And I spoke more about this particular slide about him, but I'll be moving more quickly through the slides now. This slide is something that I meditate on, and I really liked the idea of how, like I said, this conference opened with the idea of lighting using candles, and I don't know what it was. It was about knowledge, but what we did, it was, like I said, very moving. But I meditate on this particular image, and it's an image for all of us, because in therapy, we help people build a narrative where the threads of a life come together to find meaning. And in my language, where ego and archetype come together over a course of a lifespan, and that's what we work towards for all of us. And for me, I've been able to live my dream working in this field through service and stewardship, to work again together for something larger than self. I keep reminding myself of that. And think about this for yourself in terms of the story of trans health. The purpose of human life is to serve and to show compassion and the will to serve others. And if you think about what our job is here, how do we propose to achieve that? And the goal, one of the goals here, is to set up a national center of excellence. So, I want to talk about how the field has developed, some themes, what it was like back when I started, and what I've learned over time. What are the challenges then and now? Many are the same. And why you should join me. So, I traveled a lot as a young person, and I feel like travel is very useful to work in trans health. And what's happened over time in 50 years? We have standards of care. You already have standards of care. WPATH has standards of care versions 1 through 8. I've seen us go through 8 different guidelines. We've moved from the idea of treatment to health care, and that's what Dr. Marshall was interested in, wellness. So instead of treating someone, we're talking about evolving towards the whole person. Transgender is no longer considered a disorder, and that's a very important aspect to really understand. We're not talking about a disorder. We used to call it It was gender identity disorder, it was called. Now it's gender incongruence. The paradigms have shifted. So the name was gender identity disorder to gender dysphoria to gender incongruence. The organization that I work in has changed from the Harry Benjamin International Gender Dysphoria Association to the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. We follow a strategic plan, and our leaders, and this is important to understand here, our leaders are stewards, partnering with other stewards. But we're also scientists, advocates, and we have a strong relationship to the community. Education and training, this is a goal for IPATH. And in WPATH, we started the Global Education Initiative, now Institute, in 2013. And we've trained over 5,000 professionals worldwide. And we're hoping our team will be coming to India and to help you as you develop your training programs throughout India. Think in terms of competencies when you think of education, and the competencies in education and training are interdisciplinary care, which I mentioned already, relationships, knowledge, content knowledge, and the bottom line is a moral center, ethics. And I think you already are thinking about ethics as I saw the opening of this conference. And then to always think about who you are as a human being. And not to forget your family. Sometimes this is round-the-clock work. And you can be caught up in this calling and not spend enough time with your family. I'm very fortunate. I have a very supportive family. My partner is here and goes to conferences with me, although he has a full-time work himself. He's right up here. Raise your hand. Yeah. He's gone to many conferences with me and family. And we just had a grandchild 4 weeks ago. So, our first. Granddaughter. Yeah. Okay, so what are the enduring themes? And that's what is important. These are the takeaways for this talk. This is a pioneering field. You have an opportunity to really think in terms of the future. It moves very fast, even though a lot of trans people would disagree. But it's a pioneering field, and it's at the forefront of knowledge, what we're doing now in terms of brain science, in terms of reproductive care, in many ways. It's interdisciplinary, here we all are. And it's important to listen to your own truth. When you're working with someone, to believe what they're telling you, to believe them, and be able to tell that truth to anyone who might stigmatize or might have a different approach, like about conversion, at any rate. Working in partnership, including community. This is another field where you make friends, and you'll be friends with people for the rest of your life because you're all working for the same thing. It's a commitment to human rights, and always, again, that moral center. So for me, I started with travel, and I was one of the first people to travel across the ocean on an airplane in 1947 and lived overseas. And I think what I learned as a world traveler was the best training I ever had, more than graduate school. I worked for Pan Am, which a lot of you probably have never heard of, an airline. And I was in India in the 70s. When I saw my first trans person as an intern, I was also traveling. I came to India. And these are just, this is some photos from India. I also worked in Nepal and for the Tom Dooley Foundation. And that's me, actually, in a flight attendant uniform, actually, working in India, taking blood samples in the mountains. But what I learned in Nepal was about healthcare, and to learn to listen with no judgment. And there I learned the competencies in education that we use in WPATH today. I learned them in Nepal in the 70s in a training program there about learning content, interdisciplinary work, relationship to people, and having that moral center. So I just want to tell you, some of it came from this part of the world that we use in WPATH today. So, first client in 72. She taught me so much, and I just listened because I had not ever been exposed to a trans woman, as far as I knew. And she taught me everything I knew. I got involved with the community right away. We worked and learned in secret basements in the 70s in San Francisco. And the knowledge base was, we didn't have much, but the people did. And they taught me. That's what I did. I remember sitting on the floor in basements in San Francisco, and that my client wanted me present at her surgery. She had already been, her surgery had been improved, and I went to see her surgery. She felt that she would get better care if I was there, and the surgeon said, okay. So that happened. But these are the books that were out there. And what I said earlier about listening to yourself and listening to the person you're talking to, listen to what they have to say, because the literature says things like this. Wait, let me move to this next slide. To there. Splitting, perversion. That was what the literature looked like. And I understand that some of your literature looks something like that. Maybe not quite that bad. But if you listen to the person that you're talking to, you realize this isn't true. And you have barriers to care. This is from a slide that I got from a talk that your team, Dr. Sanjay, Dr. Amrita Sarkar, Dr. Aksa, I think they're here, gave at our in Montreal. Where are you? There's Sanjay and where's Amrita? Aksa? There. Oh, there you are. Okay. Anyway, so at any rate, my understanding is you have some of the same barriers here. Here's a picture, though, of way back when, where I saw the surgery with my client, and it was a reputable place. But I also had an opportunity to see a non-reputable surgery that was in somebody's garage. So what was going on when I started is people were actually having surgeries in reputable places, but they also were having backyard surgeries. And this is the location of one of the surgeries. It was the backyard. This is the nomenclature when I started, sexual deviation. Then we had a conference where we got together in 1979, and these were the pioneers, put together the first standards of care. We're now at 8. And what our organization does, which will be hopefully coming here and working with training, we publish standards of care, we have a journal, we have the Global Education Institute, and we have symposium. And I recommend that you come to the WPATH symposium as well. The mission is to promote evidence-based care. Education, research, public policy, and a vision is a world, and this is the vision that we're all working together on. People of all gender identities and gender expression have access to good health care. This is in our standards of care. This is our first president who died of AIDS. But one of the things I want to say also about the pioneers in this field, that people were at the top of their field already, and then felt like they were able to, because they were at the top of their field, they were not afraid to speak truth to power. They could go out on not exactly on a limb, but found that make this field respectable, because they already had gotten to the top of the field. This is an example of another pioneer, a surgeon, who founded something called Interplast. He went around the world as a plastic surgeon and did surgeries on children and was the chair of plastic surgery at Stanford. He got involved. But that's what you find, and I don't know if you find it here, but what we had is our pioneers were already people who knew what they were doing, and they were able then to start a new field. And they had the ear of people at the top. And I think that's what I'm noticing here at this university. So this is what we do in the field. This continues. We live with integrity. We keep going, one foot in front of the other. Work for something larger than yourself and work together. Keep the vision. The leaders are stewards, and ethics again at the center. I can't emphasize that enough. And I already mentioned in terms of growth and expansion what I've seen over 50 years. Transgender beyond disorder. And we have competency-based education and training, and part of that is we have a book club. And that's where I met Dr. Sanjay, Dr. Sarkar, and Dr. Aksa, is through the book club. And we learned about literature and not literature. We learned that a lot of people can't read through working with the work that you're doing in India. And we had many people from WPATH listening to Dr. Aksa, Dr. Sarkar, and Dr. Sanjay talk about the literature and non-literature here, and what you're doing in terms of more of a literary tradition. I was very impressed. Again, this is what our first standards of care look like, just a few pages, not based on research, but based on professional consensus. It was always binary. Persons moved from one gender to another, had hormones and surgery. Now it's open. People have options, multiple options, to match their bodies to their felt gender. And our surgeons and our hormone providers will help. And that's the idea. It's not just one way. People have options. And these are just some pictures of our leaders over the years and the visions from our leaders. Learning from other cultures is very important, and providing training. Also to think about to have fun together. This is one of our presidents, Stan Monstry. He is probably he's the pioneer in phalloplasties, and from Belgium. Another one, Dr. Walter Bachting, he came up with during his presidency, each president had a slightly different vision, and his was about moving from treatment to health. And we worked together to come up with diagnoses that were less pathologizing, working together via consensus. Again, have fun. And then we were asked to write papers about, this is a SOC 7, about different chapters. This one was on psychotherapy, that's based on evidence. And this is one that I was asked to write, and I came up with the idea we needed to do training together. And that was the beginning of the Global Education Initiative. We always work together. Major changes as over time in terms of guidelines, away from the binary, I mentioned that. Treatment to help, multiple options, so important, multiple options. Everybody's not the same. And it's not ethical, by the way, to try to convert someone to a different gender than their felt gender. So conversion therapy is not ethical, and it's illegal in some states. And what about here? It's illegal. It's illegal. So when I was president, my goal was training, international training, partnering, and using technology. And when to travel internationally with Cuba, Brazil, working in Latin America, the strategic plan was to educate and train. To come up, another consensus process was with ICD. coming up with diagnoses, a different diagnosis. Get away from gender identity disorder. This is what happened over time, the history. Cubans came via Skype to work on that. Then we went to Bangkok, so broadening to go to other countries for the symposium. Inclusiveness. Translating the standards of care. Another president, a trans man, the second trans man president. Then we have professional management, and that's very important to make this more professional and more respectable. This is the way the Institute, the global education looks. So there's a brief history. Approaching to care has changed. We're concerned with overall health. I've said that many times. This is just a picture of our team with education. Then we go to Rwanda and learn from the Rwandans, learning globally, because this is learning about trauma. No one knows more about trauma than people in Rwanda who went through a genocide. And they learned how to work with people like teachers in rural areas and then bring it back what they learned to providers in cities. And I understand you're starting to do something like that here in India, which is wonderful. You're a fifth of the world's population, so we really need to be able to get training out into rural areas. Another president, Gail Knudsen, who is the co-chair now of the Global Institute Education. We have chapters now in WPATH and work in development, and we want to have chapters, for example, with IPATH. All are working together, partnering with Endocrine Society. We work in prisons. There's no place that trans people are treated worse than in our prison system. But a lot has been done over time to improve the situation in prisons. Our last president, we came out with SOC 8. This is more on SOC 8. It just came out in Montreal. Montreal is where you all went to the conference in Montreal. It was the last conference, it was just a few weeks ago. Launched it in the main points, and this is what is important to understand about the current standards, is it used to be you had to have 2 assessments per person if they wanted surgery. Now only 1 is needed, but it's a longer one. There's no age now for people to get surgeries that is based on individualized care. Remember, I mentioned that individualized care is very important now. It's not one size fits all. Working together as a team has always been the same, and we go further in recognizing non-binary identities. Here's a picture of the Global Education Institute today. We have a steering committee, different groups that all work together in terms of education, courses on ethics. And in WPATH, ethics is a conversation. Again, it's about coming together and talking. Because ethics, there are many, many ways that people disagree in terms of ethics and morality. So a lot of it is based on professional consensus. So here it is. We have a global movement that's gone from underground to visibility, way beyond disorder, from treatment to health, and now the professional literature is affirming. And these are just some thoughts to make sure to keep up, utilize our new people, more partnerships, stick with a strategic plan, just some tips. You can see our president in America is affirming of trans health. We have the head of, one of the heads in our government is a trans woman. I don't know if you see her name is Rachel Levine. The more things change, the more they stay the same, although more people are drawn to the field. It still remains challenging, stimulating, and pioneering, and we grapple with issues together, and I hope we get to do this over the next couple days. I want to be available to grapple with you on some of the issues that are coming up in India. It's a really great time to be in the field. Lessons learned have to do with vision, grit, staying the course, partnering, I've mentioned that, the friends and colleagues, working together, and again, never forget that moral center. And here's a slide from your talk. What are your challenges in the way forward? You're developing an infrastructure. You have one. Skill training, continuing education, certification. We're working on that together. Research. This community cadre. I don't even know how to say it. Cadre? How do you say it, Sanjay? Cater. Okay. And social integration, normalization. And this is a message that came from our current president. Her name's Dr. Marcy Bowers, and she is a trans woman. You may have heard of her. She's a very, very well-known surgeon. She's been in the field probably as long as I have. We go way back together. And what she's saying to you, if there's a common thread, it's unity of purpose and integrating and inviting global participation. She's inviting global participation. She wants to speak with each of you. And she says, in the meantime, please continue to do your life-saving work. And she would like, if she could do it her way, she wants to have a WPATH conference in India. Whether that will happen is unknown, but that's the message from her, is she would like to have a conference here. And again, the importance of family. Want to mention that again? I'm here traveling with my husband. That was to a conference in Buenos Aires. Here it is, our son and his wife with our new grandchild 4 weeks ago. And also I want to comment on, if you notice the colors, these are the trans colors. And that's outside our window for sunrise. And I just was reminded by my partner that just before we left to come here, to sit and watch the sunrise and think about trans health, the trans colors. And the end, again, is this slide that I started off with, about the purpose of human life is to serve, to show compassion, and the will to serve others. Thank you very much.